Today's presenter is Mike Anderson, owner of Collision Advice. Mike is a former multi-shop owner based out of Alexandria, Virginia. As the owner of Collision Advice, he facilitates 20 groups called the Spartan 300 for OEM certified shops. Collision Advice has been selected by several OEMs to provide factory training in estimating, scanning, and calibrations. Mike produces a quarterly summary of the latest trends and statistics in the U.S. for the collision industry, as well as conducts who pays for what quarterly surveys of over 28,000 collision repair professionals in regard to insurer reimbursement. He is an accredited Master Automotive Manager through the Automotive Management Institute. Mike participates in the development of ASE testing for technicians and estimators in the United States and is fully certified in all collision categories for ASE. He is presented to groups across North America as well as Canada, Mexico, and Australia, traveling on average over 300 days a year and working with collision repair stakeholders. As we start the webinar, I want to remind you there's no verbal communication between the participants and the presenter. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the question panel on the webinar screen. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Anderson, Collision Advice, and again, I'm very honored and grateful and humbled for the opportunity to share my insights and perspectives with you. Many of you may not know who I am, but I'm the owner of Collision Advice, and we work with all industry stakeholders, OEMs, insurers, collision repair centers, and even like some of the dealership wholesale parts departments. And I'm also a former shop owner. So understand that everything I share with you today is just basically the lens or how I perceive things. So we'll go to the next slide, which is the antitrust guidelines. And I just want to read this just to make sure we all understand antitrust. Not that I'm going to be discussing anything that would even border on this, but please bear with me as I read it. It is understood that in today's webinar, we will not discuss any issues that would violate antitrust guidelines. Avoiding violations of the antitrust laws is the responsibility and legal obligation of the business owner, or in some cases, a manager. Any discussion of current prices or discounts with a competitor should be avoided. In our industry, this includes discounts, time hourly rates, charges to insurance carriers, individuals, fleet owner, dealers, or other shops to repair vehicles. Surveys of prices, discount, and cost are permissible, but only under strict guidelines and only if they're not part of a conspiracy to fix prices or otherwise restrain trade. Cost studies that lead to price fixing or price stabilized agreements would violate the United States and Canadian antitrust laws. And it's my understanding we may even have some guests on here from Australia or New Zealand. It would violate your laws as well. Remember, the prices charged must be calculated and determined by the business owner alone. And these prices should take into account the cost of doing business and include allowances for a reasonable profit. All content in this webinar is based on standard economic and management principles. Profit margins, labor rates, etc. used in this presentation are to be taken as examples only. And the intent of this workshop or webinar is to provide attendees with basic management skills, leaving them free to determine their own individual rates, profit percentages, and other operating management aspects of their business on a strictly independent basis using generally accepted management principles. So thank you for allowing me to get that out of the way. And Stacy, we will provide to the next slide. So every year, as many of you know, and you may have heard of my last CIECA webinar, is every year I kind of pick a theme. And my theme for this year is success today versus success tomorrow. And that is that, we need to understand that the things that have made us successful in the past aren't necessarily what's going to give us or create success tomorrow, no matter what industry stakeholder you are, whether it's a software provider, a wholesale parts department for a dealership, a collision repair professional, an OEM, or an insurance carrier, or anybody that's in this industry, maybe, different software providers. But I will tell you, the one thing that will guarantee our success is if we work together. Success is only going to be guaranteed if we agree to work together. Now, I have to tell you, as I put a lot of thought into this presentation, I have to tell you, I probably built 3 or 4 presentations and just killed them all. And really, honestly, just kind of redid my presentation last night. And, as I started thinking about our industry, specifically in regards to technology, I feel like our industry, from the lens that I view things and my work interactions with other stakeholders, I feel like we are behind a ton of other industries in regards to our utilization of technology. And the more I've thought about this, I really feel like it really boils down to a lack of trust. I mean, let's just be honest. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. There are some collision repairers that don't trust insurers for whatever reason. There are some insurers that don't trust shops. That's why they want photos of something to prove it was done or an invoice. I can tell you that recently I've had the opportunity to work with Subaru Corporate doing a series of workshops around the country with Subaru wholesale parts departments. And I can tell you a lot of these wholesalers, not just with Subaru but other OEMs, honestly, they're not very trusting of the electronic parts solutions that are out there because they feel like sometimes they get gamed. And then, listen, I'm not here to debate the merits of Carfax as good or bad, but, there's shops that say, hey, I worry about consumers getting angry over vehicles showing up on Carfax and end up with a customer. So it's all about trust. There are some shops that say, hey, we have all these other third-party solutions available that will make me researching OEM repair procedures a lot easier and faster versus going to the OEM website. But it's a lack of trust that these third-party solutions may have the most accurate information. So, and I could go on and on and on. As I really thought about it, I thought, our industry is really full of a bunch of conspiracy theorists. And some of these conspiracies, quite candidly, are very well founded, and others maybe not so much. So what I did is I said, when I'm building this presentation, really, let's talk about what could be accomplished if we had full transparency and trust between all stakeholders, right? I mean, and I know you say, Mike, you're living in you're living in dreamland. You're living in fairy tale land. Look, I get that, but a guy can dream, right? At the end of the day, what can we accomplish as an industry on behalf of the consumer if we had full transparency and trust between all stakeholders? So that's kind of where my presentation is today, is about what can we accomplish? Where's the opportunities? Now, I will tell you, and it's no secret, that the majority of the people I work with, while I may work with insurers and software providers and OEMs, the majority of my time spent is working with collision repairers. And I can tell you firsthand that the average person that is an administrative person, whether it's parts, estimator, CSR, a manager, or a bookkeeper in a body shop, they are overwhelmed. They look like this lady in the picture right here, right? Today, body shop personnel are, trying to keep certain carriers happy or the OEMs happy. There's more KPIs to manage. They're trying to update rental car status. They're trying to manage their OEM training certifications. They got walk-in customers. I mean, there's just so much that the average person that works in a collision repair center feels like the lady in this picture. And I have to tell you, I had one specific insurance carrier that is a national carrier. They're one of the top, I'll say they're one of the top 10. And they actually asked me to facilitate a meeting with their staff appraisers in a local market area. And it was in the Southeast. And I have to tell you, the insurance appraisers I spoke to felt just like the body shop people. They were overwhelmed in their day-to-day tasks. About the increase in SGA. SGA is kind of an old school term that stands for Sales General Administrative Expenses. And that is what percentage of sales is a collision repairer spending to pay administrative staff. I can tell you that in 2017, 2019, even 2020, during COVID, the average collision repair facility was spending about 10% of their gross revenue just to pay administrative staff. Today, we see that number on an industry-wide, from a collision repair perspective, is the average collision repair center is spending 13.8 to 14.3% of their gross sales to pay administrative staff. Now, some of this, rightfully so, is they've had to pay other wages to keep up with inflation and the economy and cost of living. But the reality is collision repairers are having to have more people, meaning actual human beings or bodies, just to keep up with the mounds of paperwork that we have. Now, I want to start off by saying this, and listen, I mean this in love to every single person that's on this call. But I know that in our industry, many of us are skeptics. We're also very pessimistic, right? And so whenever a new software product comes out, we usually see people fall into one of two camps. Number one is they're very optimistic, like, oh my gosh, this thing's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But unfortunately, the majority of our industry, no matter whether it's a wholesale parts supplier, if it's a collision repairer, or even insurance staff appraiser, most of us view technology in a negative aspect. And one of the things I want to share with you today is that we need to understand that when some kind of new software program rolls out or some kind of technology advancement, we need to understand that when it first comes out, that's the worst it will ever be. Like, if today it rolls out, it's a brand new product or a brand new feature or a software program, it's the worst it will ever be. And then after shops or staff appraisers from insurance carriers or wholesale parts distributors or OEMs or whoever, or technicians start to use the technology, feedback can then be given to whoever the software company is or the equipment company, that then it can get better. But it can't get better until we actually give it a chance. So think about it this way. When new technology is rolled out, it's the worst it will ever be, and it will only get better. But here's the other thing I will tell you that I see with a lot of entities, right? And that is that I don't care whether it's an insurance company, if it's a dealership, if it's an OEM, or it's a collision repair or an insurance carrier. Oftentimes, the different silos or different departments within that company or corporation do not always communicate with each other. And this creates a lot of the frustrations we have when we see new technology introductions in our industry. Remember, this is only the beginning, and it's going to get better from here. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And now let's talk about consumers, and let's go to the next slide. First of all, every single thing that we do should be about the consumer. It should be about how it will impact the consumer in regards to their experience when they have the misfortune of an accident, or their experience in the way they get their first, estimate or repair plan on their vehicle, or how long it takes, or the rental car experience, or whatever. We should remember it's all about the consumer. So what are some things from a technology standpoint we need to think about? First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we need to make sure that when a vehicle's a total loss, that whether you're an insurance carrier, a collision repair, or an OEM, that it's important that we look out for the consumer by making sure that all of their personal data is erased before that vehicle goes to a salvage yard. Now, most commonly, this can be done through the navigation unit on the dash of the vehicle, or you can go to the owner's manual, it will tell you. But all of us, whether it's an insurance carrier, collision repair, an OEM, a dealership, we all need to take this personal responsibility of ensuring that the customer's personal data is erased in the event the vehicle is a total loss. We also have to be very sensitive about protecting the consumer's data. Now, I'm not here to debate or discuss the merits as to Carfax is good or bad. I have some friends that work for Carfax. So I'm not here to say it's a good or bad thing. What I am here to say is that collision repairers call me on a regular basis, and they say, look, I wrote an estimate. I didn't even fix the car, and it ended up on Carfax, and the customer's mad at me. Look, I'm not here to discuss the merits about if Carfax is good or bad for a consumer or anybody. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to safeguard this consumer's, private information, which leads me to talk about Facebook and social media posts. It is very concerning to me when I log into social media and all the different groups, how often I see auto body shop technicians or estimators or even insurance appraisers posting photos of a vehicle's repair where the consumer's license plate is showing. I know there was an instance one time where there was a celebrity that did commercials for a specific insurance carrier, and somebody actually posted. It wasn't even a body shop. It was somebody from another entity in our industry that posted and said, hey, this person is getting their car fixed and they're not insured with who they do commercials for. Like, that's just wrong. I think we really have to take, and look, I'm all about, and I appreciate the technicians that have pride in their work and want to post social media photos about the quality of their work. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the consumer privacy. Do we need to start thinking about making sure we're not sharing that out there without some kind of consent from the consumer? Speaking about the consumer, one of the things that we at Collision Advice have done, and we are actually still continually doing, and this is one of my amazing teammates, Cheryl Driggers, is we're doing some what's called customer focus groups, right? Now, I got to share with you, I got this idea originally from a former 3M employee who retired named Jeff Laramie. But one of the things we're doing is customer focus groups where we bring in like 25 customers that have had their cars fixed at a collision repair facility. And we ask them questions like, what was your preferred method of communication? Did you like getting the text updates? Do you like getting, these photo updates of your vehicle when it's in disarray? And what was the process? How was the rental car experience? How was the insurance experience? And listen, when we go in and do these customer focus groups as Collision Advice, and we've done 2 of these, and we have 5 more scheduled in the next 30 days, it's to gain insights from the consumer's perspective. We don't want to fight to be right because we believe in something so wholeheartedly. We really need to understand the consumer's perception. And one of the common things we've heard from the 2 customer focus groups we've done so far is that the consumer said, and they didn't use these words, survey fatigue, but that's basically what they said without using those words. They're like, I'm getting I got a survey from the dealership. I got a survey from the rental car company. I got a survey from the insurance company, one from the body shop. And they basically say, after they completed one survey, they start to get an attitude, and the rest of the surveys are going to be negative. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to start rethinking about technology. And do we need to have all these different entities, right, doing CSI surveys to the consumer, or could we just agree on one common solution that might be accepted by all parties? I think we also have to look at from the consumer standpoint. So one of the things we saw from collision repairers was oftentimes a customer would put on their survey, did you have to return the vehicle back to the shop? And they would check yes. But it wasn't for a quality control issue. It was for a back-ordered part. And we asked the consumers, we're like, how could this have been phrased differently? Because, it could affect an insurance company DRP scorecard for a shop. It could affect an OEM scorecard. And not to mention, it could give the consumer a bad review when it was something beyond their control. I think as an industry, we have to revisit that question and not just ask, did you have to return the vehicle back to the shop? But we need to gain insights. Was it on back-ordered parts? But personally, I also believe that moving into 2024 as an industry for all stakeholders, rental car companies, insurers, OEMs, we have to ask ourselves, do we want CSI surveys, or are online reviews going to be the CSI of the future? Let's go to the next slide and let's talk about CSRs, Stacy. When we go to slide 14 of 58 of my PowerPoint presentation, let's talk about technology for CSRs. First of all, we know that today's consumers, because of liquid expectations, shout out to my friend Mark Fincher who taught me about that from CCC, when we talk about consumers, they want us to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Listen, we have to absolutely have the ability for a collision repair shop to receive estimate request or to schedule an appointment. We've got to have that on our website. We even have to have that on our Google business listing. But here's where I think there's opportunities for technology is there an opportunity for artificial intelligence to be used to help answer questions that have been submitted through a chat on our website or Google business listing? Could artificial intelligence be utilized to help us with phone calls, like if they need a tow? I think we have to adopt new technologies to help us to deliver to that consumer the expectations they have based on their interaction with other companies. Let's go to the next slide for estimators, if we could, please, Stacy. We at Collision Advice, as you know, we do surveys on a quarterly basis called Who Pays for What. And when we do these surveys, one of the things that we do, ladies and gentlemen, is that we ask shops, collision repairers, how frequently do you research OEM repair procedures at the time you write an estimate? And one of the things that we've seen, ladies and gentlemen, is that it still is only at like 31% all the time and 29% most of the time. And ladies and gentlemen, when we ask people, why are you not doing this? The number one reason we get is shops say, I don't have enough time. First of all, that's not an excuse that could be used in a court of law if you didn't fix the vehicle properly. But this responsibility of researching on repair procedures doesn't just fall to the collision repair professionals. It also falls to the insurance carriers. There's one insurance carrier that I actually work with in Canada, and they actually pay. The insurance carrier pays for all of their DRP shops to have a free subscription to All Data because they take that so seriously, and their staff appraisers all have access to All Data. It's not an endorsement of All Data. It's just speaking truths. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, when we ask people, why are you not researching home repair procedures all the time? People say it's because I don't have enough time, or B, I don't know how. Now, that's very scary for me on behalf of the consumer. In addition, I will give you an example. as many of you may be aware, we get the opportunity, and we're very grateful that we get to do estimate training for multiple car manufacturers. And we have found that just to replace a quarter panel, there can easily be 300 to 400 documents that you have to research just to replace a quarter panel in regards to the battery and calibrations. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to use technology to figure out how can we speed up this process of the research. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. Now, again, people often ask me, what do I think about artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is kind of like nuclear weapons, right? If it's in, our hands in the United States, hey, that's a good thing. If it's in North Korea or Russia's hands, it's probably not such a good thing. AI, in my opinion, is kind of the same thing. First of all, we know that artificial intelligence gets taught, at least my understanding is, based on a history of data that's been collected. So if you have a bunch of people that are writing improper estimates, meaning not including the things that need to be done, then all we're doing is, I'll go back to this thing that everybody says, practice makes perfect, but then somebody else came out with a statement and said perfect practice makes perfect, right? If you're practicing with bad behavior, all you're going to do is just make that bad behavior more prevalent. And I think when we look at artificial intelligence, whatever part of our industry we look at that we have to keep in mind that if somebody's not doing something properly and it's teaching artificial intelligence, that actually could have a negative impact on our industry. So I think we've got an obligation to make sure that the AI is not based on poorly written estimates, but maybe those estimates are vetted to ensure safe and proper repairs. I'm also going to say this, right? And again, listen, I'm no way am I here to say that any stakeholder or industry is good or bad. But I will tell you, as I work with a lot of collision repairers, one of the things that I see that is very time consuming is that body shop A writes an estimate for, hypothetically, not violating antitrust, using this as an example. They write an estimate for, say, $10,000. The insurance company or carrier or third-party payer, maybe it's an OEM warranty claim. So not just insurance carriers. They write an estimate for, say, $7,000. Now there's a difference of $3,000. Well, the body shop staff is so busy that they're like, you know what, it's going to take me 2 hours to figure out this difference, that they just kind of kick that can down the road so they get time to figure out the differences. Listen, that does not benefit the consumer. It doesn't benefit the insurance carrier in regards to rental car costs, right? It doesn't benefit anyone. So what is it going to take for software to be developed to help us very quickly find out these differences, right? Now, I understand there are certain companies out there, third party, that offer that as a service, and that's great. But here's what I'm saying is, with technology, why isn't there the ability? And I'm just going to dream big here, right? It's a blank canvas. You can't blame a guy for dreaming. But if I have an estimate, and why can't I just import the insurance estimate and it figures out the differences for me? Listen, at the end of the day, the conspiracy theorists are going to argue, well, the third-party payer, and again, it could be an OEM warranty claim. I'm not just picking on insurers, right? They could say, well, they're just doing that because they can delay, they don't have to pay it. But it's not in anyone's best interest. Let's also talk about, OEM research, right? Like I told you about estimators, so many documents. How do we streamline that? Now, the OEMs, I mean this in love. I hope I don't offend any of you. But we also know that one-time use parts are not identified in the electronic parts catalogs. They're only identified in the electronic service manual or in repair procedures. So now I'm a body shop and I'm having to write this estimate, and all of a sudden I got to go into a different program to look up one-time use parts, right? Again, what is it going to take for our industry to say, hey, the OEMs, listen, if you're supplying your electronic parts catalog to a third-party provider like CCC Metro Autotex, that basically there's a program just built with software that just analyzes and then he looks for those symbols or looks for the word replace or discard. I have to believe technology can do that. I will also say that I believe absolutely that artificial intelligence, the best use of that, and there's lots of uses, but the best use for that, in my perspective, is for scheduling, right? We know that a lot of shops have an abundance of work right now, but let's take historical data and analyze it to figure out what's the optimal width. Listen, I can tell you most all of the paint companies, all of them, and even other consultants in the industry, they have the formulas and insights on how to take historical data and and calculate optimal WIP to streamline the scheduling process so we can have more throughput. Listen, throughput benefits everyone. The insurance carrier in regards to rental car costs and how long their money may be tied up, as well as the collision repairer, because if they get to break even by day 10, there's more money they can put to the bottom line. But at the end of the day, what's holding us back from, implementing some of these? Again, it boils down to trust. And it's not always true. And here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, Mike, are you talking about trust between insurers and shops? No, I'm talking about trust between other software companies, trust between equipment companies. Like, we all need to learn to play in the sandbox together. Here's another thing I'm going to say. And I heard this from actual insurance staff appraisers, not just body shops, but where they talk about, hey, the insurance carrier says, hey, I can pay for this, but I need a copy of the invoice or I need a photo of it first, right? And now all it does is slow down the process. The technician's not fixing a car when they got to stop and take a photo of something to provide documentation. Or they take the photo and maybe it goes into their body shop management system, and then the estimator has to take and send that to the insurance company. Why can't we just streamline that process? Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy, and I'll see if I can pick up the pace a little bit. Let's talk about the parts departments of collision repair centers. Again, we unfortunately, the estimating systems are not 100% accurate when it comes to identifying one-time use parts. And I understand when they get the electronic parts catalogs, it's not identified. So again, where's a solution at that can go through and identify one-time use parts, right? So it's right there in the estimating system, no matter what system it is, so that a parts person's not having to research this. Here's another thing I'm going to tell you, and we work with a ton of collision repairers, right? But that is the data entry of a parts invoice, right? We know factually that if you have a parts person working in a collision repair center, that they are spending 40 to 50% of their hours per week. So I work 40 hours a week. I'm spending 15 to 20 hours a week just manually inputting parts invoices. That is crazy. We absolutely need to embrace solutions that allow the vendor to export that invoice back into my management system so it posts. Now, obviously, we do know that there are, some management systems that allow you to do that today. But the problem is on the wholesale parts department side, that if they add an additional part to that invoice that was not ordered from me, now it throws the whole system out of whack. Let's stop the madness. Let's fix that. What about parts credits? You have the accounting department that's trying to close out their month, and they're missing a parts credit or missing a parts invoice, and they got to go and spend all this time on the phone with the wholesale parts department. What about having a website where I could just go and I could get it and grab it and download it? Let's talk about parts from the collision repair center on the wholesale side. When are we going to start having our industry so they actually can see the inventory level at the warehouse so that the supplier doesn't have it, the wholesale person, I can make a better, accurate decision on when to bring that vehicle in, right? Understand this, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you on the parts wholesale side, collision repairers make decisions every day, as well as insurance carriers, in regards to when I'm going to bring a vehicle in or put it into production based on the availability of the part. And when a wholesale parts department doesn't give me accurate information, and they say, hey, the part will be here tomorrow, and then I get it in and it's not available, it's actually on back order, that's not good for the consumer who may run out of rental car coverage. That may not be good for the insurance carrier or the rental bill, or it's not good for the collision repairer. So you say, well, Mike, you're identifying all these things. What's your solution? The solution is, if we can tap into the inventory at the warehouse and see what the availability is, we can make better educated decisions. Here's another thing, and again, I'm not here to debate aftermarket parts are good or bad. But why do I, as a collision repairer, if I have an aftermarket part that doesn't fit, hypothetically, and I'm going to go to, I got to go to CAPA's website and fill out a complaint form, why can that not just be embedded into my estimating system? So if I take a photo of it, and it's right there in the estimating system with a part number, and it can just be interacted then, so I don't have to go to another website. Again, I'm dreaming big. Let's go to the next slide, Stacy. Let's go to accounting and human resources. Listen, this is a shout out to the OEMs. Listen, it's time we get the dealership management systems to the table for CIECA. Listen, you got CCC, you got Mitchell, you got Rome, you got PropNet, you got Summit, you got Nexius. We have all the body shop management systems are involved in CIECA. It's time we get the CDK, the Reynolds and Reynolds, and the dealer track, and even QuickBooks or NetSuite people involved in CIECA. First of all, we know that dealership accounting software doesn't integrate very well with body shop management systems. And for my brothers and sisters that work at the dealership side, this is a nightmare for them, and they're having to do double entry. The thing is, if we could solve that problem, we could give them all this time back. How good would that be for everybody? What could they do with that time? They could use that time to improve throughput or give a better customer experience. I think it's also important, again, ladies and gentlemen, that we get the CDK, Reynolds and DealerTrack, and I think Techiana is the other new one that's out there. We've got to get them involved in CIECA so they understand the body shop industry, because the profit and losses on the dealer sides is so weak and old school. Something has to change. We need to get QuickBooks involved in CIECA. And I don't know if anybody's ever reached out to QuickBooks, but we know that I get calls from collision repairers. Many of you may not know, but I actually have a degree in accounting. We, Collision Advice, offer accounting services. QuickBooks at a certain amount of time maxes out. So now you get a collision repair where it maxes out, and when it maxes out, what it does is it sends everything over duplicate, and now it just screws up your QuickBooks. When do we get QuickBooks or BusinessWorks involved into CIECA? Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And you'll see an example of a dealership accounting document on the right side. And this is an independent collision repairers document on the left-hand side. Maybe as an industry, we need to come up with a standard chart of accounts. Maybe, nobody has to use it, but maybe a suggested chart of accounts so that when a shop wants to set up their QuickBooks or has an outside bookkeeper or accountant who doesn't understand our industry, they know how to do this. We also need to, again, work with our dealership brothers and sisters to help them to get more input and insights on their side. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. Let's talk about HR. It's amazing to me that there is no software solution specific for our industry in regards to HR. As someone that does a lot of training on behalf of the OEM manufacturers, I can't tell you how much at the end of the year, every November and December, we're getting calls from OEMs and shops saying, is there any way you can get 5 more people in your class? Because if you don't, their certification is going to expire. When do we stop the madness and we have a software solution that can remind people you're 90 days out from this person expiring, 60 days, 30 days. One of the software solutions, and I'm not endorsing it, I'm just sharing insights. One of the best software solutions I found for HR in our industry is a software product called Bamboo. And I love it. But I also believe, ladies and gentlemen, that the reason we need to have an affiliation or an integration with a software program, and maybe it's not Bamboo, it's somewhere else, is that we need to give a more modern onboarding experience to anybody that comes to work in the collision repair industry, right? Because maybe they've worked somewhere else that had a very professional onboarding experience. So maybe we need to look at something like Bamboo. And maybe that's something where, again, I'm going to challenge iCar again and love that maybe they can integrate with Bamboo because to help keep track of some of the iCar training. Also, when do we maybe get a possibility of getting some of the payroll companies involved in CIECA, like ADP or other companies that do payroll? So again, we can understand the flag sheets and things of that nature in the management system. I don't want you to think again that Mike Anderson is here just identifying problems, but I'm hoping to create awareness for all industry stakeholders that maybe someone might just say, hey, let's figure this out, right? Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And let's go to where it says parts wholesale vendors. I had the opportunity to do some wholesale parts managers meetings with Subaru. And we interviewed collision repairers, parts individuals, estimators, owners, managers, as well as the wholesalers. And we found out that shops said, what we want from a wholesale parts distributor is someone that accepts electronic parts ordering, someone that processes credits in a timely manner, 2 days or less, someone has good inventory, great communication, the ability to scrub parts orders by VIN, and these things. But we also asked dealerships, what do you want? And they obviously said we want someone that pays their bill on time, has minimal returns. For you collision repairers, the wholesaler said that if your return ratio was less than 4%, they considered you a really good client. And again, they wanted somebody, again, that electronically ordered parts. So again, electronic, that was the common theme. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And let's talk about, again, wholesale vendors. Again, wholesale vendors, the ability to identify one-time use parts, the ability to export an invoice back to the collision repairer, or to provide inventory level at the warehouse. Could this be accomplished using technology? Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy, and let's go to where it says insurance carriers. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the insurance carriers, for those of you, my friends with the insurance carriers, as I was sharing with you, I did a focus group for a top 10 insurance carrier where they took me into the Southeast region and they brought in about 40 of their staff field appraisers and they had me do a focus group with them. And ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, some of the things that the staff appraisers shared with me is like, Mike, like when I get an assignment from my company that I work for, it'd be really nice if in that assignment it told me there were dogs at this person's house, or that the vehicle was in an underground garage where I know I wasn't going to see it so I can communicate with the consumer. Again, it's really listening to your team, right? I will also tell you that when I interviewed staff appraisers, again, this is not body shops. I was really surprised at this, but when I interviewed staff appraisers, this was a group of 40 from a top 10 carrier, they said, Mike, I really wish that we had the ability to figure out the difference electronically between the shop estimate and my estimate, because you don't know how much time it takes for me to go through the estimate and figure out the difference. I will also tell you that some of the insurance carriers told me, staff appraisers, that, Mike, we feel like we don't have time to write an accurate repair plan because we've got this tack time that we have to meet, that we have to upload the estimate at a certain time. So again, how can we utilize technology? Let's go to where it says workforce. You know, one of the things we know is that a lot of OEM manufacturers today, as well as collision repairers, want their shops to have a quality control process. Well, it's time we move into using electronic quality control apps and move away from paper. And also, I think that we also need LMS that serves all industry stakeholders, so people don't have to know 5 different usernames and passwords, but they can log into just one. In the essence of time, I'll try to pick it up a little bit. You go to the next slide, it says workforce, skill-based approach, Stacy, and it says employee development, a skills-based approach. This is an article that I read from McKinsey Company, and it said organizations that focus on employee development generate benefits for all. And then it really said tech-enabled capability building and skills-based hiring are great places to start. We all know we have a career shortage for all facets of our industry. Even wholesale parts departments said, hey, we have a hard time finding people. Insurance carriers do, body shops do, everybody does, right? Even the equipment manufacturers. I think at the end of the day, we've got to understand that we've got to move our industry from old school to innovative and technology, and it will help us to recruit and retain the brightest. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And it's just showing you some insights from our Who Pays for What surveys about quality control. That 69% of shops are still using a paper-based quality control system. Only 22% are using CCC's checklist, and then Sherwin-Williams and Assured Performance, now owned by OEC, 3 to 1%. At the end of the day, let's push this forward. Let's go to the next slide and talk about refinish suppliers, Stacy. One of the things I think our industry needs to embrace is that most distributors or jobbers can provide like 5 different to 7 different sub-invoices for what a shop purchased from them. The industry has changed. We now see that people buy a lot of different things from their jobber or distributor. And we've seen that those can fall into as many as 13 different buckets. I could buy software where I pay software cost to my jobber distributor. That means to go to software cost to my P&L. I may buy things like stock parts, like seam seal or double-sided tape, nuts, bolts, clips, or fasteners. I'm going to have my liquid. I'm going to have my allied. I might buy equipment from my distributor. I might buy paint booth filters from my distributor. But the amount of things we buy from distributors today is double what we used to buy from them, say, 8 to 10 years ago. I think it's time that we start talking about, even from our distributor standpoint, how do we reclassify some of these things? And what is actually paint materials and what is not? Let's move to the next slide and talk about rental car providers, if we could, please, Stacy. I was at a recent OEM conference for a large OEM manufacturer, and they were describing what they felt the rental experience would look like in the future. Let's say that I drive a brand X OEM manufacturer, I'm just going to make up a word. Let's say I drive a Nissan, right? And I go and rent another Nissan. What about through telematics, how my personal Nissan automatically can preset my favorite radio stations, my temperature, and my seat adjustments in my Nissan because I'm renting another vehicle? That could be accomplished through telematics. One of the things we know that consumers want today is they want personalized settings. So a lot could be ramped up in regards to the rental car experience. Let's go to the next slide where it says OEMs, please, Stacy. I'm still a proponent of this. I can tell you there's a lot of confusion on the collision repair side in regards to, how do you actually write an estimate on something that's going through warranty for transportation damage or whatever. Again, I'm still a proponent that shops should be able to receive an assignment, just like a DRP claim, where they can write an estimate on OEM warranty or transportation claims, and then certain parameters can be set up, and we can streamline this so these vehicles aren't sitting at the port or in other areas where they're backed up. And again, OEMs, I really think we have to push on your side if we can get those two different silos. Remember, we talked about silos, getting the electronic parts catalog division to talk to the electronic service manual division, so one-time use parts are identified in that. That would then push to the estimating systems, and it would be better for everyone. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. We talked about one-time use parts. Let's go to the next slide where it shows the Ford slide, please, Stacy. Some OEMs actually have symbols. This is an example from Ford. Ford uses a symbol of a trash can to identify one-time use parts. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. In this case, Nissan Infiniti, they use a black dot with a white X. Mazda uses a black square with a white R. General Motors has moved to a trash can. Toyota and Lexus use a black dot. Subaru uses an asterisk. Let's start educating people about these. And again, get these in the estimating system so that the shops don't have to go to a different software program, which takes time, doesn't provide value to the consumer. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And let's again continue to talk with the OEMs. OEMs, again, we got to work on those accounting documents. But I also can tell you that when I look at CIECA and its mission, which is technology, that there are a lot of shops that are purchasing their own factory scan tools, but they don't have training to go along with it, and they're not utilizing it properly. I believe that there has to be some advancements in regards to, online training on how to utilize the factory scan tools. I also believe that we could utilize technology to provide a better customer experience for consumer in regards to a total loss. I was talking to an insurance company that says they have a term that's called lapse can, and they said that's where they monitor the renewal of insurance with a consumer, and they see a lot of people that don't necessarily renew their policy. There's a lot of defection on both for the OEM as well as the insurance carrier when a vehicle's a total loss. So how do we reverse that trend to benefit both the OEM as well as the insurance carrier in regards to how total losses are handled? Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy, where it says dealers. Again, dealerships, a lot of you dealerships may be on this call, and you are doing calibrations for collision repair customers. You need to be embracing some of the scheduling solutions where shops can online make their appointment for these ADAS calibrations, again, to limit the amount of downtime, rental car cost, insurance expense by getting these vehicles going through a little bit quicker. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy, and let's talk about equipment manufacturers. I was in a collision repair facility recently, and I was talking to a technician and said, hey, how's everything going? And he was telling me how he was having issues welding on a specific OEM vehicle. And he called another industry consultant, not me, someone else, and that industry consultant said, use a smaller wire. Well, I called the car manufacturer and I said, this was the advice this shop was given, and I just don't think that's right. And the OEM manufacturer, who was a trainer, said, absolutely they shouldn't use a different type of wire. That's wrong. And he says, can you see when the welder was updated? And so I called this welder company's his distributor that sold him as a welder, and I said, can you tell me how to verify when this welder last had a software update? And it had been 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, listen, when we start thinking about technology, what can we do to automate, like when a welder needs an update? That's critical to the consumer safety. So then I start thinking about all the network management tools. CCC has a network management tool. Integra has a network management tool. I know other companies have network management tools. But when can we move forward that when a shop takes and installs a paint booth, or they install a welder or a rivet gun, they automatically can communicate with the network management tool companies, and then those network management tool companies could push out the notifications that, hey, your welder needs to be updated, or your computerized measuring system, or your scanning software. But I think there's a lot we could do for the equipment manufacturers and distributors and suppliers to get involved with these network management tool companies, and let's see if we can't automate this, because the last thing we want is a shop loading on a car that doesn't have the most recent welder update. Let's go to the next slide, please, where it says additional thoughts. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this, and this is where I'm going to be closing out in the next 5 minutes. Listen, software can be used for the good of the industry. Software can be used in order to save people time and give them quality of life and provide a better consumer experience. Software can be used to ensure safe and proper repairs. Software can be used to help somebody to be profitable, whether it's an insurance company or a body shop or whoever it is. But here's the one thing I'm going to say, back to my original comment about nuclear weapons, who's in the hand with. There are software programs out there that a lot of people will utilize in regards to parts price matching. And some of these are maybe questionable or borderline as to whether or not they're moral or even ethical. I believe that whether you're an insurance carrier or your OEM manufacturer has a certification, that shops enroll in, maybe it's time we start thinking about a morals clause in all of those. The people are committed to do the right thing ethically and honestly. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, and Stacy, we can go to the next slide. We'll talk about cybersecurity. I will tell you that I personally know of over 30 collision repairers who have been hacked and held ransom for Bitcoin. So again, the issue of these data pumps is real. And, there's always the concern about vehicles getting hacked. At the end of the day, I think as an industry, I think that it would be great if CIECA could take the lead on this and educate people and partner with the right people to help collision repairs from getting hacked, which doesn't benefit anyone because customers' personal data can be shared. Let's go to the next slide, please, Stacy, and I'm going to try to wrap this up in about 3 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, if you're a collision repairer, think about, are your employees posting stuff on Facebook that may be breaking your customers' privacy? Let's embrace scheduling and using artificial intelligence. Let's think about understanding what's the standard for pay materials. Let's get back to making solutions better where I can import a parts invoice and the parts are coded properly. Let's think about, is it time to rethink the questions we ask on the CSI survey or move to online reviews? Let's think about how can we embrace technology to get the right parts data in all of the systems to make it streamlined so we don't have to use multiple programs. Let's also think about, is there an opportunity for CIECA to be a resource where people could post, different e-learning modules or things that could be utilized to help shops? I could go on and on and on, but at the end of the day, I know we've had some technical issues. I apologize if anyone couldn't hear me. Stacy, we'll go to the question and answers page. Listen, I hope that you take everything I said in the spirit of love. If anybody on this call would like to reach out to me and get more information, say, Mike, what are you really thinking about this? There's a way I can provide insights. At the end of the day, I just want to help everybody in our industry so that their team or your staff has a better quality of life. And I believe the key to that is what can we do to help our industry go back where people will trust each other again. We get rid of all these conspiracy theorists and let's just have people be transparent so people aren't assuming and they can actually know. And let's use technology to help our industry catch up with others. So Stacy, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mike, so much for presenting today. So the presentation has been recorded and will be available early next week along with the slides. And we do thank everyone for coming and apologize about the technical difficulties. And we greatly appreciate Mike presenting. So that is the conclusion of the webinar.